I can't believe I'm actually writing this. To strangers, no less. This isn't something I ever imagined sharing outside of maybe a therapist's office. And even then, I'm not sure I could get the words out. But I feel like if I don't let it out somewhere, it's going to eat me alive from the inside. So here I am. I'm a 40-year-old husband. I've been married to my wife, Sarah, for 10 years. We have 2 kids together, a boy and a girl. They're still young, innocent enough to think their parents love each other unconditionally and that nothing bad ever happens inside the walls of their home. And up until recently, I believed that too. I really did. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it felt real. Solid. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our Sunday pancake breakfasts. She'd steal the covers. I'd always forget to start the dishwasher. We fought sometimes, sure, but we always came back to each other. I thought that meant something. Lately, though, I don't know. Something shifted. At first, it was little things. She stopped kissing me goodbye in the mornings. She'd flinch when I touched her shoulder in the kitchen. Started wearing earbuds around the house more often, zoning out, disappearing into her phone. I'd ask how her day was, and she'd just say fine, and go back to scrolling till we stopped laughing. I didn't even notice until one day I made a dumb joke, something she would have cracked up at before, and she just stared at me like I was a stranger. Sex? That became rare, and when it did happen, it felt mechanical. Like she was checking a box point one night, I reached out to her in bed, just to hold her, and she rolled over and said, "I'm just not in the mood for anything right now." Not angry, not cold, just numb. Like the feeling itself had drained out of her. I laid there staring at the ceiling for hours. My wife was 6 inches away from me, and I never felt more alone. And then came the outbursts. Not at me, always at the kids. One minute she'd be hugging them and baking cookies. The next, she was yelling because they were too loud or spilled something. Our daughter cried once because mommy looked mad all the time. That wrecked me, that I wanted to believe it was stress, or hormones, or burnout. Anything but what it really was. I doubled down. Bought her flowers. Took over more chores. Gave her space. Booked a weekend getaway. Nothing changed. If anything, she pulled further away. Then came the doctor's appointment, and everything I thought I knew about my life, about my wife, fell apart in a single moment. But I'll get to that. All I know is I'm not writing this for advice. Not really. I just need someone to hear me, because I feel like I'm drowning in something I never saw coming. And I can't tell anyone in real life. Not yet. Not until I understand how the hell the person I loved most became a stranger, sleeping 6 inches away. IT still doesn't feel real. Even now, weeks later, I keep waiting to wake up and realize this was all some sick dream. That I imagined it. Maybe I misread something or misunderstood. But I didn't. In that moment, the one where everything collapsed, is burned into my memory. That IT started with the doctor's appointment, that I'd been dealing with what I thought was a lingering UTI, burning, discomfort, the usual. I finally went to see a urologist, expecting antibiotics and a quick fix. But the doctor looked at my test results and paused. He said, "This looks like an STI." I laughed. I actually laughed awkwardly. Told him that couldn't be possible. I hadn't been with anyone but my wife since we started dating. I said it twice, like maybe saying it again would change the test. He looked at me with that calm, professional expression and said, "You should talk to your partner." That night, I sat in a car outside our house for almost half an hour before going in that I didn't know what to say or how to say it. She was leaving for a business seminar the next morning, something she claimed was a weekend networking event for work. I left her a voicemail instead. Calm, measured. I said, "Hey, can we talk when you get back? Something came up on my appointment today." She called me back about an hour later. Her voice was off, like someone trying really hard to sound normal. She said, "Is everything okay?" What did they say? I told her they said it might be an STI. There was this pause. Maybe a second. Maybe 5. Then, "Oh, well, that's strange. You're not suggesting I gave it to you, are you?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She started getting defensive. "You know I haven't been with anyone else." Except, suddenly, I wasn't so sure. The next day, I was home alone. The kids were at school. She was off pretending to be on a business trip. I walked into our closet to put something away, and I saw them. The journals, She's been keeping them for as long as I've known her. It used to be something I admired about her, that she could put her feelings into words, that she valued reflection, that I'd never opened one. Not once in 10 years, but that day something cracked. I needed answers. I needed the truth. I told myself I'd only read one page. The first entry I opened wasn't dramatic, just a day in her life. But then I kept reading. I couldn't stop. Pages turned into hours, and then I found it. She called him Jay in the entries. Said he made her feel seen. Said he was passionate, assertive, dangerous. Said it was exciting, a thrill. Said she missed his mouth, his hands, the way he made her feel like a woman again. She described sneaking around, meeting him during lunch breaks, lying to me, telling me she was stuck late at work when she was really in a hotel room across town. Point one entry talked about how she felt guilty, not because of what she was doing to me, but because she feared getting caught. Another said she felt nothing during sex with me anymore, that it felt like faking love with a friend. I wanted to throw up, but I kept reading. IT wasn't just one guy. There were others, Tinder hookups, random flings, old flames. She used a fake name, a separate email. She journaled about how liberating it felt, how she could be someone else for a night, how motherhood and marriage made her feel like she was disappearing. I found a line I'll never forget. I love my kids. I really do. But sometimes I wish I'd waited. Sometimes I wish I'd lived more before I settled. Settled. That's what I was to her. A safety net. A nice guy. The stable one she could always fall back on while she went off chasing her chaos. I felt numb. I couldn't cry. Couldn't scream. I just sat there on the closet floor with her diary open in my lap, shaking like I'd been dropped into ice water. I don't know how long I sat there, reading pieces of my own heartbreak in her handwriting. But by the time the kids got home, I had put the journals back exactly where I found them. No one could know, not yet, that I was living in a nightmare, and somehow I had to pretend everything was fine. And the worst part, she had no idea I knew. After I read her journals, something in me shifted, not explosively, not all at once like in the movies where the betrayed spouse screams and throws things, but more like a quiet internal collapse, like a part of me had simply shut down in order to survive the weight of what I had uncovered. I sat there in the closet for what felt like hours, surrounded by the remnants of a life I thought I understood, her handwriting whispering details of a woman I no longer recognized. It wasn't just the cheating that shattered me, though that alone would have been devastating. It was the way she had been able to narrate her infidelity so casually, so poetically even, as if it were part of some story she was telling herself where I was just a background character, a dull but necessary presence, not the man who had given her everything. She wrote about these other men, some with initials, some just described vaguely, and how they made her feel alive, how she needed the thrill, the secrecy, the validation, and how she sometimes felt guilty, but never enough to stop. She even wrote about how she hated the feeling of being tied down, how marriage had become a routine she no longer respected, and how she stayed with me partly for the kids, and partly because I was safe and predictable that I didn't confront her that night. I didn't confront her the next day either. What would be the point? What could she say that would make any of it feel better or less real? Instead, I went completely still inside, the way you do when you know something is going to hurt more than you can handle, and I quietly began to prepare for the next chapter of my life. Not because I was brave, but because I was numb, and numbness, I've found, is sometimes the best fuel for clarity. I started reading everything I could find online, Reddit posts, forums, legal blogs, not about how to fix a marriage, but about how to document the end of one. I learned quickly that I lived in an at-fault divorce state, and that if I could prove adultery, it could affect not just the financial outcome, but also custody arrangements, which was the part that terrified me the most. I could take the heartbreak. I could take the humiliation, but I couldn't take the idea of losing my kids, not for even one weekend more than necessary. That fear gave me direction. That fear gave me purpose. So I started collecting evidence. I went back to the journals and photographed every page that mattered, saving them to a password-protected drive and backing them up in the cloud. I found a hidden Tinder account tied to a separate email address she never used for family stuff, and I took screenshots of her conversations and profile. I found a receipt in the trash for a hotel in the next town over on a day she had told me she was working late, and I took a picture of that too. I bought a notebook and began logging everything. Where she said she was going, what time she left, what time she got back, what excuse she used, and I color-coded the entries to match them against GPS pings I hadn't even collected yet, but knew I would. Then I ordered the tools, a GPS tracker I could place under her car, a voice-activated recorder I could hide in the vehicle, a pair of cameras disguised as smoke detectors that I installed in the bedroom and living room under the guise of a home insurance upgrade. When I told her the insurance company gave a discount for extra safety equipment, she didn't even blink. I tested the devices obsessively, making sure they recorded clearly and uploaded securely. I watched YouTube videos on how to angle cameras correctly, how to muffle the lights on a VAR so they wouldn't glow, how to hide things in plain sight. And through all of this, I kept smiling. I kissed her goodbye when she left. I helped the kids with their homework. I cooked dinner and asked her how her day went and listened to her lie straight to my face. And every time she did, it made me feel less guilty about what I was doing, because the truth is, she had already declared war on our marriage. I was just finally responding in kind. By the end of that second week, I had everything in place: a timeline, recorded conversations, physical evidence, emotional betrayal documented in her own words, and the beginnings of a legal case I never wanted to build. I didn't know what I was going to do with it all yet, or how I was going to pull the trigger, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. When this all came to light, I wanted there to be no question, no doubt, no way for her to twist the truth into something convenient. I didn't want to win in court. I wanted the truth to win. I wanted her to finally see what it felt like to be powerless against reality, that I never thought I would do it that way. In fact, if you had asked me just a few weeks earlier how I planned to confront my wife about what I'd uncovered, I probably would have said something about a quiet conversation, maybe late at night after the kids were asleep, or in a therapist's office with someone to mediate the disaster. But by the time her birthday rolled around, something inside me had changed, not out of rage or vengeance, but from something colder, something still and settled, like a calm before a storm you already know will hit. For weeks, I had been gathering proof, copying pages from her journals, listening to the recordings from the voice-activated device I hid in her car, watching the GPS logs match the lies she fed me in real time. And the more I saw, the less I recognized the woman I had built a life with. She wasn't just cheating. She had constructed an entire double life right under my nose, complete with secret names, coordinated hotel visits, and a level of emotional detachment I can't even begin to understand. At a some point, I stopped thinking of the evidence as protection for myself and started seeing it as a mirror, one that I wanted the people around her to look into, especially the ones who still believed she was the perfect daughter, the loyal wife, the selfless mother. That's when the idea for how I would expose everything came to me, not in a flash of anger, but in a kind of dreadful clarity. I would not confront her in private. I would do it quietly, in front of the people who believe in her most, and I would do it in a way that required no shouting, no accusations, no spectacle, just truth. I chose her birthday. She was planning a small gathering at our house, just family, a few close friends, and our kids, who were excited to help bake the cake. I went through with everything like nothing was wrong. I helped string up decorations, complimented her dress, even picked up wine and flowers on the way home, just to sell the image one last time. The only difference was that this time, I brought a single envelope with me. Inside the envelope was one printed page from her journal, just one, carefully selected, not because it was the most graphic or cruel, but because it was the most revealing. In it, she described how, months earlier, she had invited her long-term affair partner, the one she called Jay, into our house while I was away on a weekend trip with the kids. She wrote about how thrilling it felt to sneak around inside the walls of our own home, to have sex with another man in our living room while the echoes of our children's laughter still hung in the air. She mentioned how she washed the sheets after he left and then kissed me on the forehead that night like nothing had happened. And the sentence that stayed with me the most, the one that hit like a nail through the heart, was when she said that sometimes doing these things made her love me more because of how clueless and trusting I was. I folded that page and sealed it in the envelope. writing one quiet sentence on the outside in block letters. For anyone who still thinks she's who she says she is. When the party started, everything felt like a performance. Her laughing, her hugging people, her smiling for pictures, thanking everyone for coming. She played her role perfectly. Her mother looked proud. Her friends toasted to her. Our daughter gave her a glittery handmade card, and she cried and said it was the sweetest gift she could ask for. And I, somehow, stood there through all of it, playing the part of the supportive husband, knowing exactly what was coming. Toward the end of the evening, someone asked if I wanted to say a few words, and I said yes because I did. I raised my glass and spoke softly, saying all the right things, that I was proud of her, that she juggled so much and made it look easy, that we were all lucky to have her. And she smiled at me like maybe, just maybe, she still believed her own performance. That was when I walked over to her mother, handed her the envelope, and said gently, "I thought you should read this when you have a moment alone." She looked confused, but she nodded. Then I turned to my wife, kissed her on the cheek, and walked out of the house, got into my car, and drove away. There were no raised voices, no accusations, no grand declarations of betrayal. Just silence. And that envelope, resting in her mother's hands like a ticking clock. By the time I reached the end of our street, my hands were trembling, not from panic or guilt, but from the sudden release of holding it all in for so long. I had lived for months under the weight of her lies, pretending everything was fine, pretending I didn't know. Now she was the one pretending, and everyone else was about to see the truth. The night I walked out of that house, our house, I didn't go far. I didn't crash with a friend or flee to some hotel out of town. I booked a small, quiet room 15 minutes away, the kind of place with beige carpets and hollow-sounding doors, where nobody asks questions and the silence feels thicker than the walls. I didn't sleep much. I didn't cry either. I just lay there in that unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. Not the party itself, not handing over the envelope, but the fact that I had finally stopped pretending. After months of holding it all in, of moving through my days like a ghost, I had finally let the truth breathe. The next morning, I filed for divorce. There was no dramatic confrontation. No panic call from her. Not at first. I think deep down she knew, or maybe she hadn't opened the envelope yet. Maybe she thought I just had some kind of breakdown, or that I was bluffing. But by the end of that week, after the lawyers had sent the initial documents and my intentions were clear, the calls started coming. She didn't scream or beg. She didn't even deny it. She went quiet, then angry, then cold. She said I had violated her privacy, that what I did was humiliating, that I blindsided her. I didn't engage. I let the lawyers speak for me. There was nothing left to say. She had built a version of herself that everyone around her adored. The loving mother, the hard-working wife, the doting daughter, and I had stripped that illusion away with one piece of paper and one well-timed gesture. Her family was shocked. Her mother called me 2 days after the party. I let it go to voicemail, but I listened. She was crying. She said she didn't know what to believe. She said, "We thought she was happy," and I could hear the heartbreak in her voice. Not just for me, but for the version of her daughter she thought she knew. That voicemail hurt more than any of the journals ever did. That my own family, when I finally told them, was supportive but stunned. My father said he always thought Sarah was too perfect, but I could tell he never really believed she was capable of this either. My mother cried. My sister offered to fly in to help with the kids. Everyone rallied around me, but I still felt hollow inside. Not angry, just emptied. The kids, they're too young to understand the full scope of what happened. And I'm grateful for that. I didn't want them to carry the weight of their mother's choices. I just told them that sometimes grown-ups stop being good at being married, and that it's nobody's fault but ours, and that we still love them more than anything in the world. And that part is true. I'd tear myself in half if it meant keeping them safe from the fallout of this. And as for Sarah, she tried to pivot like I knew she would. She played the victim. She hinted at emotional neglect, tried to twist the narrative that I was distant, that I had changed, that maybe we both made mistakes. But it didn't land. The evidence was too strong, too damning. The truth doesn't need to shout when it's printed in your own handwriting. There are still moments when the weight of it all hits me, usually at night, when the house is quiet and the kids are asleep, and I walk past the empty side of the bed where she used to be. I think about the good years, the memories we built before everything rotted beneath the surface, and I wonder how much of it was ever real. Was she lying the whole time? But did she just stop choosing me along the way? But I don't stay in that place for long anymore, because now I'm freed and I'm not living in a lie. I'm not walking on eggshells. I'm not wondering where she is, or who she's with, or what version of herself she's performing for someone else. I have my kids. I have the truth. And I have the chance to rebuild. Not just a home, but a life that feels honest again, that I didn't set out to destroy her. I just want to stop being the only one who knew. She lit the match when she started living a double life. All I did was open the window and let the smoke pour out.